Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Today I wanted to talk about fake news and why it's so important, why our founding fathers included freedom of the press in our Constitution as a constitutional right. Our founding parents were people who had been living under an oppressive government of England, King George III. And basically, if you read the Declaration of Independence, which of course came before the Constitution, for some of you who don't remember American history, basically what they did was in the Declaration of Independence, they listed the grievances that they had against King George III. And then when they wrote the Constitution, what they did was they included in freedom of the press, not at first, but in the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment includes the freedom of the press. And the reason for that is because the let's say our inalienable rights that come from our Creator apply to every atom in the universe. Every person on the planet is given, because we're all created by the same Creator, we're given unalienable rights to fulfill our purpose in life. Okay, so when they wrote the Constitution, they basically stood on the idea that we have these rights, but then the application of the rights was our Constitution. People come together to write a Constitution to delegate responsibility to a group of people to enable them to do the things that individuals can't do, like our national defense. Now, some people will say taxation is not necessary, but somehow they have to pay for our national defense. And again, we are having to, if we have to pay out of our pockets and then just say we're going to raise an army and I need a check for you for $1 million, that's something that most people cannot do. So they have a budget, and they're representing us. Our founders did based on the will of the people in the House, by a majority rule, basically, and the rights. The Senate is supposed to stand up on based on protecting our rights, our constitutional, but also our unalienable rights. So when we're looking at the Republicans, for example, who say they stand on the Constitution, but then they vote to acquit somebody who is basically undermining the security of the United States. I'm talking about according to the impeachment documents. I'm referring to, I'm not accusing somebody, I'm talking about what was in the impeachment documents when they felt the House of Representatives, who represent the will of the people, got together and voted by majority rule that Donald Trump had abused his power. It was an abuse of power. So we're looking at impeachment as an abuse of power. The Constitution gives them the right abuse of power. And then they had to justify the abuse of power. Okay, so abuse of power, the Constitution addresses the use of power and the abuse of power. What the rights, duties, and responsibilities and the privileges are basically of an elected official, but then when to remove an elected official from power for abuse of power, from office for abuse of power. Okay, now then the bulk of the federal law is meant to stand on both universal law and federal law, kind of like this: children are children of both the father and the mother. Okay, now, but as far as fake news, what we have right now is when the President of the United States is basically spouting off fake news there are two power games that are associated with weaving an illusion. One of them is genocide, and one is slavery. They're based on revenge. So technically speaking, Donald Trump should have been when that happened, it should have been impeached for lying to the people, for weaving fake news. Now, when I'm talking about fake news, I'm talking about the rights, the constitutional rights we have and freedoms based on the Bill of Rights, and that is to keep our government honest. Okay, telling us, because we have the right to stand and protest. The power our government has comes from the people. We are delegating responsibility to our government. So when there's talk about fake news, now there, like I said, slavery and genocide are the two power games that governments play that are based on weaving an illusion. And once the lie, the grand lie, has been told, the truth doesn't overcome the lie. It just reaches the point where nobody knows who to trust. And when that happens, when the government is weaving an illusion, that's when genocides, we can guarantee that a genocide is occurring. One of the things that, if you look at our Track Our Progress planning on our organization website, it talks about the exit strategy for Iraq, which was based on a grand lie, just like Donald Trump is telling. George Bush told a lie to justify the Iraq War. And because it was based on a sense of judgment, it devolved as a genocide. So, fake news. Donald Trump basically has been weaving many, many lies. He's been caught in many lies. But George Bush got caught in a lie too. And one lie, that there were weapons of mass destruction, that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and the intent to use them, that was enough to justify our Congress to wage a war that went against the basic tenet of our legal system, that someone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. When that occurred, basically it was like it kicked the United States back to the time when somebody could accuse somebody of something and they had no way to defend themselves. The UN's weapon inspector, Hans Blix, had, and 10 years after the war had been over, said, and after the preemptive strike occurred, said they still hadn't found weapons of mass destruction. So it can be considered an illegal war. We are looking at a replay, basically, of the Iraq War, but this time it's a hostile takeover, you could say, of the United States. The revenge brings together 5 power games: war, genocide, massacres based on the game of greed. These are 7 deadly sins. Then slavery and human rights violations based on, let's say, a sociopath who basically functions for his own interest. And then, but I'm not going to diagnose mental illness. I'm just going to say the power game of lust. And then, which is based on weaving an illusion. Like I said, lust and envy are 2 of the 7 deadly sins that are part of the game of revenge. And then terrorism. Once we go through and we look at these power games, then we can start to unravel the illusion that's been woven. We understand that the only thing, once all the lies have been told, nobody knows the truth. Imagine that you have a community, a school. Somebody is new in school, and a high school, and there's a bunch. You've seen this movie over and over again. They're teenage movies, but they're also something like, I lived through that. High school was the worst time of my life, kind of thing, because of the Mean Girls Club. In fact, there's movies about the Mean Girls Club. Okay, so you have the idea of people telling lies, weaving an illusion, and the person can't defend themselves from that idea. That's what character defamation campaign is. A character defamation campaign is a form of genocide. And a genocide is a terrible thing, because right now there is no protocol, no accepted protocol for ending a genocide. Our government has like laws for character defamation, but without understanding the whole parameters of that, how a genocide, because marriages based on romantic attachments can turn into genocides when the people realize that they have different goals, and then they separate, and then there's an act of revenge. In fact, many marriages break apart. They're actually genocides, and that they destroy the family. They can destroy businesses. They can destroy everything. When governments play it, that's a global genocide that's devolving. Genocides keep sending out ripples until someone stands up and says stop. Now, I'm standing up and saying stop for the global genocide that's devolving based on the Iraq War, and unraveling all this illusion that's been perpetrated, and the lies, by saying the only thing you can trust is, at this point in time, is universal law. You can look at universal law because it applies to every atom in the universe, and you can say, the U.S. government justified going into Iraq and said, we're going to defend those people from their own government. That Saddam Hussein is axis of evil, and those Iraqi people are it's like, okay, but people don't know all the facts. People are trying to live their life. They don't know the facts, and then they go out and they go along with it. They vote for it. That's what Congress did. They voted to go to war against Iraq, even though the Senate a couple years earlier had basically declared that the sanctions had been working. Basically, that's what's happening. You should rely on the President of the United States to be telling the truth to people, not weaving an illusion to justify what, a hostile takeover of our country? What would be the reason for this? So it's a power game that we have to recognize the games. We have to recognize how they work, why they don't work. For the people who play the games, why they don't work. Because people who play the game of genocide are playing the game of envy, and basically what they're doing is, because it's based on judgment, they will be judged. Under universal law, they will be judged. Okay? So, the fake news idea, the first Constitution, the First Amendment to the Constitution, not the first Constitution, the First Amendment to the Constitution guarantees the freedom of the press. In Rwanda, there was a disc jockey who was on the radio. He was the first disc jockey who's ever been accused of genocide. He was encouraging people to rise up and kill other people. He well, not necessarily kill them. He basically called them cockroaches. People were cockroaches, equating people and cockroaches. In Guernica, in Spain, that was a genocide during the Battle of Guernica. That was a city that had been completely torn apart, and basically the media was not allowed to tell the story. Basically, it was they walked out, and the people had to leave, and the people who didn't leave were all slaughtered. Okay, so what we have right now is a very serious thing going on. But the people, I've been talking about a paradigm shift in our thinking that we have for world peace to come, which is what we all want. half the population has prayed for peace, and now it's coming. If we are living in the third dimension and we are evolving, we're evolving, whether it seems like it or not, to the point where we let go of the power games, which is what's happening right now. The games don't work. That's what happened when an innocent person is crucified. Then the games are over, basically. And you can say that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified, and he, even though he wasn't part of the zealots and the rebellion against Rome, basically, by crucifying him, he collapsed the Roman power base. The U.S. power base has been collapsed by sacrificing Saddam Hussein. And now what's happening is that collapsed the U.S. power base, and that's why Russia and China are moving in. Okay, so we need to start to address this idea of the power games, how they work, and why they don't work. And then instead of relying on the power games, then we start to realize that we can get the life we want, not by playing the games. We can get natural resources not by waging war in Afghanistan for 20 years, but we can get it by making win-win agreements through the international government. Win-win agreements build trust and set the stage for future agreements. So there, we rely on universal law, and then we rely on win-win agreements, and then we start to build up the trust again that has been totally blown out of the water by all the lies that have been told. So if the truth doesn't overcome the lies, it just reaches the point where nobody knows who to trust. And that's where we are right now in the world, is all the lies that have been told. There's very little trust in the world. You don't know if you are a high school student and somebody is telling lies about you behind your back. How do you defend yourself from that? If somebody says that person is a serial killer, how does anybody know the truth if they don't know who you are? Somebody has to come over and risk being murdered because of that. You don't know what people are saying behind your back. It's like it's a childish game where it's like, I'm going to outsmart you. How many fingers am I holding up? And then the unsuspecting victim of the game says 3. And then you go, oh yeah, I can outsmart this kid. I'm not going to put up 3 fingers. I'm going to put up 5 fingers. Okay, see how that works? It's kind of like, how do you can't defend yourself from prejudice and ulterior motives. Somebody has to stand up and defend you. So that's what I'm doing. I'm standing up and defending Saddam Hussein. I know that sounds kind of weird for an American to stand up and defend him, but we're going to consider that he was innocent until proven guilty, and at this point in time, he hasn't been proven guilty. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the Iraq War as a basis for fake news, and then we're going to start unraveling and use that as a setting up the exit strategy for Iraq. We're not going to sweep it under the rug. We're going to use it as a protocol, that government proposal as a protocol for ending genocides. Because right now there is no accepted protocol. Ethnic cleansing, it doesn't have anything to do with character defamation when you stop and think of it. That's a cultural level thing. It doesn't have anything to do with revenge. It has to do, we're looking at revenge. We're looking at the 5 power games associated with revenge. We're looking at 2 of them that are based on weaving an illusion, enslaving people. How about the sexual predators, sex trafficking, young people, anybody getting trapped into sex trafficking. This is something that we're looking at, these 2 power games that are based on weaving an illusion, and then blasting them open and exposing the lies for what they are. You can't just sweep that under the table. You can't sweep sex trafficking under the table or the rug like dirt and expect it to go away. It doesn't go away. Okay, we're talking about sociopaths who continue to do that until they're stopped. So we are looking at people who think they can outsmart other people by playing this game behind how many fingers am I holding up. Okay, right now you tell me how many fingers am I holding up and whether I can outsmart you. How do you know how many fingers I'm holding up? Am I obliged to hold up the number of fingers that you say? 3? Or can I do 5 or 6 or whatever? See what I mean? This is where we are. And then it devolves down into this. Now, for those people who really believe that it's a great idea to tell lies, I'm going to include Donald Trump. How about George W. Bush? The lie he told to justify the Iraq War. The idea that he was going to get revenge on Saddam Hussein instead of holding Osama bin Laden responsible for what had happened. Okay? What we're going to do is we're going to expose the games that are based on this idea, based on revenge, and then everybody plays the games. We're not going to accuse anybody other than saying these are examples of it, and then we're going to start to unravel it because everybody plays the games. This is a protocol for ending it, but once we expose the lies and how to overcome them, then you can say, I know what you're doing. I know that. But you better be careful because that person has based his or her life in many cases on that lie. Okay, so this is where we are. We have to expose it, but at the same time, we have to not put the judgment on it. The people who are playing the games of that, it comes from being hurt. Being a sociopath, they fear intimacy. They fear being close. They fear being hurt. And so what happens is they put themselves into a situation where they're hurt all the time. It's like what they fear they bring towards them, and they're hurt all the time. And then what happens is like Donald Trump, he fears being hurt. He has set himself up where he holds on to people and he pushes them away. He holds on to people and he pushes them away. He has a prenuptial agreement, for example, with his wives. And then when he pushes people away, he says, you're fired. He's made a persona based on firing people. But that's basically, he's been accused of sexual assault, a sexual abuse, basically. So basically what he's doing is he's saying, I fear an intimate relationship where it's just unconditional love. And instead, basically, it's functioning on that level of fear of being hurt. And then he puts himself up, and people just keep on. They recognize that fear that he has, and they keep on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. The knee-jerk reaction that stops a war makes a genocide worse, because basically he's becoming more and more defensive all the time. His fears are backing him into the corner. Okay? And that's the knee-jerk reaction that stops a war, is putting somebody down because they play the game of pride. But a knee-jerk reaction for somebody who's a sociopath makes the crisis worse. Now, the only way that can change that is something that we're going to talk about, like a good cop, bad cop idea, and also the idea of trying to turn the person around, educating so the games are bad, not the people. Okay, so we'll go into that deeper. This is something that we're just looking at now, and we're exposing the games, and then we will look at that in other government proposals. Right now we have a a lot of work to do just stopping genocides, because that is based on the game of envy rather than the game of lust. That's two different games. Genocides are basically different than sociopaths. A sociopath plays the game of revenge. Now, Donald Trump, for example, is playing the game of revenge on the Obamas, the Clintons, and the Bidens, and others. He thinks that he can get a voice and abundance by playing the game of revenge. Okay, so we have to unravel the understanding of the games. Fake news is part of our legal system because we have the right, the freedom of the press has to do that. When you undermine the press, like in Guernica or in Rwanda, compare the number of genocides that are going on where people are backed into a corner and see no way out of it because of illusion. Now, you have to also remember that we are dealing with a hostile takeover, basically, of our country now. Like in Iraq, we were doing a hostile takeover of Iraq to gain control of natural resources and a strategic location in the region. A better way to deal with that, instead of this waging war which killed possibly up to 1 million people, killed and injured up to 1 million people in Iraq and the United States, if we're just looking at what happened in the United States to U.S. soldiers, that's not what happened in Iraq. And that was an illegal war. So what is happening right now is that we are responsible, if this is an illegal war, we are responsible for rebuilding Iraq. We played the games. We played them on an innocent person. We went down into the abyss. We lost our power base. And that's why there's this schism that's going on, healing the schism and the repulsive effects, including the pandemic. Then we have to stop playing the games, and then we have to start rebuilding. We are a third world country that basically is dealing with a hostile takeover. Let's say we're like Chechnya or Georgia, where we are dealing with a hostile takeover, and now it's time by taking away the rights, unalienable rights of the Iraqi people, to get them back, we have to climb out of the abyss. We have to get our reputation back, our identity back, and then we have to rebuild Iraq. So this is a very, very important thing. We cannot take a genocide and sweep it under the rug, because ripples of effects have gone out to affect every person, and the pandemic is one of them. We cannot continue to face the pandemic without addressing the sociological triggers that happen. And that's the same thing that happened with all the pandemics, like Ebola and the genocide that are occurring over natural resources in Africa right now. The genocide against the Jews in the Holocaust, all of these all around the world. We're no different than any other country, so we have to start to address what genocides are, and we have to stop the games, and we have to address the legality of the Iraq War. Fake news. Basically, when you hear people in the government telling lies, then this is a red flag warning that should go off. It should be sirens all over the world that are going off saying, we got ourselves another genocide starting. We've got ourselves some slavery going on, sexual trafficking, people losing their rights. This is a red flag warning. Okay, so now, this is a serious topic. I ask that you like, share, and subscribe. Not because you like the topic, but this is something that we need to understand. Okay, and so I ask that when you like, share, and subscribe, that you share this information with other people, and as much as it's terrifying, but we have to understand that the games don't work, to make that paradigm shift where we understand that we can get our life, but not by playing the games. If we are getting our life by playing the games, okay, let me talk about that for just a second. When we make the paradigm shift, okay, we think we can get our life by playing the games. The games stop working, we go into the abyss. Then we start to climb out of the abyss, and then we realize that we couldn't get our life by playing the games. An example of that, an easy one to understand, is how about diabetes or alcohol abuse? Can you get your life by injecting drugs, being a heroin addict? No. It might seem to work for a little while, but then it stops working. And basically, when you lose your job and your family and your financial support, then sometimes you have to you lose your identity. You become, instead of speaking from my own experience, I was a dental hygienist. I had my identity, and then people would say, "Oh, there's the dental hygienist." I go to that person, going down the street. There's my dental hygienist. Okay, then I lost my identity. It's okay to be associated with that, but then when I got squeezed out of my job, I became homeless. Okay, so then people saw me. There's another homeless person right there. Okay, I lost my identity. Cancer patients are a cancer. You have cancer. How about you're homeless? You have cancer. Basically, you're a crook. You're a criminal. You're a sociopath. They don't see you anymore as a person. You become part of a field of people. To get your identity back, you have to rebuild your life on a higher level. Betty Ford, when she was Gerald Ford's wife, President Ford, when the scandal came out that she was an alcoholic, she went down into the abyss. She became alcoholic. She wasn't wife of the president anymore. She wasn't Betty Ford, wife of the president. She was alcoholic. So what she did to get out of it is she stopped drinking, and then she said, there are a whole bunch of alcoholics in this world. I'm going to just be one of them, and then I'm going to start building my life. But with what I have, the resources that I have, I can build the Betty Ford Foundation. And that's what she did. She created a new identity for herself. And that's where we go when we start to rise out of the abyss. All right. So that's where we are now, is we have to start to come out, not back to square one, but where we start to create the life we want. A 12-step program brings us back to square one. 22-step program brings us back to the point where we're creating the life we want. We can't get it by playing the games. Okay? So that's where we are now, is we want to not go back to square one. We want to go back to the point where we are functioning on a higher level, and we're saying, like, never again. All right? So that's all I wanted to talk about now. Fake news are red flag warnings. Okay? Anybody who says fake news, basically that is triggering a red flag warning. Okay, so like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.